새못이 옥색 치마 금방 물린 조댕기가 잠공을 차고 나가 구름 속에 나붙긴다 제비도 놀라냥 나를 치고 보더라.
Welcome to This Embodied Voice. My name is Suzanne, and this episode's guest is Alice Chung, mezzo-soprano and co-founder of Wear Yellow Proudly. Wear Yellow Proudly was started in 2020 as a response to the increase in xenophobia and violence against Asians around the world during the pandemic, and the initiative aims to bring awareness to Asian culture through music, art, and education, as well as providing a space for Asian artists. Alice took me through her upbringing as a Korean American, how she started singing, and why she chose not to sing when the pandemic hit last year. And we jumped right in by talking about the Korean song you just heard called The Swing. So, Alice Chung, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, the people listening are going to hear at the beginning of the episode you singing one of your favorite Korean art songs, The Swing. And I was wondering if you could tell us about the text, the meaning of the text, and also what the song means to you.
The text is, I actually only did the first verse because I only ever learned the first verse, and now I'll be learning it for something else. But the first verse is the new light blue ramie skirt, ramie, which is a type of light summery fabric, so which is not silk. The gold pressed hair ribbon as I swing up to the sky, flutter in the clouds. The swallow, also surprised, stopped flying mid-air and watched. And the second verse is actually just a continuation, and at the very last part it says, all of my worries the wind carries away. So it's a very beautiful text painting song, which is why I always loved it.
I love how in the last line, when the swallow stops flying, there's a little break in the line, and then it resumes.
Yeah. And it's so operatic.
It does feel very operatic. It sort of starts low and then has this gorgeous soaring height, and also beautifully sung, I have to say.
Thank you.
So how did you first learn the song or hear of the song?
I heard my mom sing it a few times. Growing up, I was obsessed with karaoke. And so after, like, during college years, like, when I was away from home, I would come back during break, and, like, one night we would always just kind of have, like, a karaoke night. After dinner, I would always say, oh, we're going to do karaoke, and then we're going to work our meal off. And then so my mom would join in later, and sometimes my dad as well. And we would sing just, like, all of these, like, pop songs, popular songs back in her day. So I know a lot of Korean oldies songs. And this was one of the songs that she would sing sometimes, and I thought it was always so beautiful, how the melody soars, and it just, like, not that I ever, like, the way that they swing on a swing sometimes is, like, not just sitting, but also they've planted their feet on the actual part where you sit. So they're actually standing and swinging, but I've never done that, but I always loved swinging, on the play set when I was a kid, and it just reminds me of my childhood and how carefree it was.
Were your parents also musicians, or were they sort of amateur?
They're not musicians. They do love music, though. And my mom sang in, like, children's chorus and things like that when she was younger, but not trained musicians.
Yeah. And when did they come to the U.S.?
I think they came sometime in the 70s. My mom came in through Alaska and eventually made her down to California. I think my dad made his way through Hawaii and then ended up in California. And then they met there, with my mom's side grandfather introducing them both.
Oh, that's adorable. Actually, I had something similar happened with my husband, where, stepdad was introduced by the grandmother, which I think is so, almost feels kind of old school, doesn't it?
It is. And, it's so funny. There are times when I just I feel like it would just be easier for someone who knows me to just introduce me to someone, then I don't have to deal with, playing the dating app game or all of those things. And
they've been vetted,
Exactly. So I now see the merits of of their ways.
For sure. And you said you know a lot of Korean oldies, but would you call this song art song or like a pop song or a folk song? I don't know how to classify it, and I had a hard time finding information about it.
Yeah, actually, it's the same for me. I also had trouble finding classifications. This one I would consider both like a folk song and also a classical song. And for me, probably what defines those two is like, what is it about, number one? In what era are they speaking through? And like, the way they're talking about traditional garb, and they have little ornament-like moments that are more reminiscent of certain styles of singing. And so that would help me define what might be more like a Western classical art song versus a folk song. And also, because of like a lot of like history that's gone on, there, I think, was a dry period where Korean creativity was silenced and stifled. And so coming out of that, though, because of westernization, there was a bit more, and there was a lot more Korean classical literature.
What are some other ones that are like, is the swing like better known, or what are some more
The swing ones? Is probably, it is known, but probably not as much as done as 그리운 금강산, and that, which translates to longing for Kumgang Mountain. And I actually did this piece for the Lunar New Year festival that I did through my initiative Wear Yellow Proudly. And the text of it longs for, it's a South Korean piece that is about these mountains that have like more than 12,000 peaks, located in actually North Korea. And so there are parts of it that you can tell that it's longing for family who have been split apart because of the borders. So the longing for reunification, and but also I think a homeland that it's, it was once one homeland, but now it's been separated apart.
Do your parents still have family back in Korea, either south or north?
We do have family, and actually my mother's uncle, so her father's older brother, was actually he ended up being taken away into North Korea. So, and they never heard from him again, and presumed dead. And I also know people who have escaped from North Korea, or like whose family has come out and like has settled down in America. And and there are so many more things that I've learned about since my childhood, because all I've grown up knowing is what my parents told me. And of course that's not enough, because they also grew up just learning about stories from people. They haven't experienced it for themselves. And nowadays there's even in popular culture and Korean dramas, like there's more talks of like longing for reunification. And a Netflix drama, well, I think it was a drama there and then it's just now on Netflix, but called Crash Landing on You. And it's a very beautiful story, and I don't want to give away too much, but there's like a musical element as well that makes it, you know, just even a little bit more beautiful. And I think everyone should watch it. It's one of those stories that is helpful, and like it's helpful to know like how do people live? How do people live beyond the borders?
So what was your upbringing like as a Korean American? You said your parents met in California.
Mm-hmm.
Did you speak Korean at home? Did you go to like my parents are Polish, so there's like a Polish Saturday school.
Oh, yeah.
Was there equivalent for you?
Yes. For the first 5 years of my life, I lived in Los Angeles, and mainly in Koreatown, and on Saturdays or Sundays, I don't remember which, it was definitely the weekend though, I would also go to church, and I would learn Korean there, among other things like ballet, and I also learn like Korean traditional dancing, which sometimes involves like fans sometimes, and like knife or swords. It was all very fun. But then once we moved out of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area, I didn't really have those resources, but we always spoke Korean at home mainly, and it's funny because nowadays when I go back home and I'm there for like a little bit, and I'm meeting up with friends who are not Korean, I'll accidentally speak in Korean to them, and then like I have to like correct myself, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I should be speaking in English. And so I don't actually know which one I spoke first, Korean or English, but right. I have a theory that if you react to if you instinctually react to like pain, for instance, so if I'm touching something hot accidentally, then no matter how long the phrase or the word is, I react in Korean. Yeah. And that makes me think maybe Korean was my first language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult for bilingual speakers.
It is weird.
But reading and singing in Korean is actually fine. I have always had a knack in pronouncing things. Mm-hmm. So actually, funny enough, knowing Korean helped me in terms of IPA, because I hadn't learned IPA at the time, and when I was encountering my first Italian art song, for instance, or first Italian aria, I should say, knowing Korean helped me speak Italian better or sing Italian better, because there are a lot of pure vowels. It's mostly pure vowels, and then a few little like combination types. But the consonants actually helped me, because Korean consonants are very much in between of plosive and non-plosive and dental. Mm-hmm. So it did actually help me. And it also helped me with Russian.
I was going to say, when you listen to that, there are those sort of strange, to me they sound like in-between vowels or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I totally know what you mean.
Yeah, so that really helped me. And then once I learned IPA, of course, like that also really helped me. But to start off like with Korean, I feel like it helped my ears. Mm-hmm. Because I just had like an entire other language of sound, and different types of sounds and possibilities.
So how did you start singing? What's your like musical background?
I always loved singing. But in terms of my parents, my proper Asian parents, of course, made me take piano. So I have like over a decade of piano lessons in my belt. And like for a very brief moment, just enough to get my calluses formed and then to peel off, I played guitar. um, but my mom always had the intention of me playing piano because she's like, well, if you ever live alone, like, you know, you can rely on music to, you know, to emotionally support you and you'll never like be bored. Yeah, I thought that was very sweet. And I was interested in playing other instruments. Like I wanted to play a violin or viola at one point. When I was a child, I wanted to play the clarinet, but like, you know, they couldn't afford one. So my mom gave me a toy one and then I would like, you know, pretend to play on a toy one. But eventually in middle school, I joined choir and show choir, which my mom attributes to like, you know, me coming off the academic path because they always wanted me to be a doctor. But, you know, I think once I had that, and especially the show choir aspect, that kind of like, you know, got me on the hook and I was instantly obsessed. An entire like world was introduced to me, you know, musical theater and other things. Like it was so eye-opening and inspiring. And then so I also did that in high school. And I got into college and I was like, okay, to put my foot down, no more music. And, you know, I have to focus on my studies. Like, that's what my mom told me. And I was like, that's what I'm doing. And then I was like, well, it can't hurt to join like a women's choir, a women's chorus. It's only like 2-3 hours, like in a week. They only meet once. Like, it can't hurt. Of course, it distracted me because then I found out that I could get voice lessons through a like graduate TA, and I would just sign up just in my curriculum and stuff for college credit. And I was like, well, my parents couldn't pay for it before because I was both too busy and they didn't have the money. So now I'm going to do this. I'm going to get classical like voice training because I always wanted to know. And turns out, I really loved it, and I will always remember the piece that really sold me was Brahms's Feldheinsamkeit. Yes. And the German romanticism of the text and the music just really like it like resonated with my soul.
Was it assigned to you or did you hear a recording?
It was assigned to me, and I'm very thankful. I just realized, like, you know, this art form, it's just so beautiful, and like the poetry is incomparable, and there are centuries worth of this. And then eventually, you know, getting into more like scenes and arias. And then finally, like, standing on a stage, and doing, you know, I think my first thing was, like, in Zarzuela. And that, I started feeling really, really at home on stage when, you know, like, not even a recital at that point. It was just, like, the bright lights of being on that stage. And that washed out all of the audience. Like, it helped me. And it was my time away from being me and then time to, like, embody this character, whether it was larger than life or, like, you know, a very much normal character. It was like it was therapy for me. And so that's when I knew. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. It took convincing, and my parents weren't completely supportive of it because they were worried about me. They were worried about my well-being and my future and being the whole quote-unquote starving artist, which of course the pandemic kind of shed the light of that for a while, and it still is, even though we're slowly coming back. And they eventually like were convinced and, you know, saw that like I was succeeding and saw all of these other people who believed in me. So that's how I got here, and I'm very thankful to all of the people who encouraged me, even when I didn't know anything, and I didn't know if it would work out. And yeah, I'm very glad to the people who have championed me.
So what's something that you are like working on vocally at the moment?
At the moment, I'm going to Music Academy of the West this summer, so they are planning this 21st century Liederabend with all female composers, and I'm working on this piece. I think Missy Mazzoli's actually very first piece, Song from the Uproar, and it's another one of those pieces that just like the colors and the text like just resonated within me as a person. And so I'm really excited about that. And I'm also working on some like the Wesendonck-Lieder for like the song competition that they have. And these other pieces, one called Diamond Impressions specifically, from this body of work called Sentiments, and it's by Suzanne Lis, who is a Taiwanese composer who is currently living in Korea, actually. And her music embodies like so much of what I love about American culture, like the jazziness, the cabaret style. Yeah, and but of course like her identity of being an Asian woman. And so like that's also something how I feel like, you know, I am American, and I don't think anything could like deny me that, because I have American values, American ideals. And if I were to, you know, pop on over to Korea, it would most likely be different. And there's no judgment or no, you know, shame on any of that. It's just that I am different, and that's what makes me a Korean American, not necessarily Korean, not necessarily American. So I'm delving into more Korean art songs, and the two that I mentioned, the swing and Longriver Kumgang, are also programmed on it. And I hope to be learning more. My friend and colleague and I are working on this Asian art song database so that we could kind of have a collection out there for people, to whoever wants to dip their toes into that realm. It will be, you know, it's easy for them to find them, to access them, and like hopefully get a good transliteration going.
So last year, you and Helen Huang, who I actually know from Tanglewood from like eons ago, you and Helen started Wear Yellow Proudly. And I would love if you told us about the name, the organization, what kind of work you guys do.
Yes. So actually, Helen, she approached me already with the name as well. It wasn't 100% solidified, but it was a great name. And she had talked about, I feel like there is a gap that needs filling, and people aren't talking about the things that are happening. Number one, which were all, you know, with the onset of the pandemic, all of the racial tensions that were already there, and even more, was causing like a lot of violent behavior and a higher amount of xenophobia against Asian people. And a lot of it, most of it, were going unreported. And even I did not know. Helen had to tell me. And she told me that, like, you know, some of her colleagues were receiving comments as things like, you know, if they talked about it, if they had put it on social media, people were telling them, it's not your time. This is the time for Black Lives Matter, which it has always been the time for Black Lives Matter, but it was mainly these things that infuriated us, because, people should be able to hold on to and support several different social issues. If we're only going one at a time, we're going to fail. Where the LGBTQ movement, failed. And it should always be a multi-pronged approach. And of course, it's much easier said than done. And also, because to combat all of these racial tensions, we wanted to share through how we do best, one being music. And with music, we would also share, Asian songs, get people more aware of all of these different cultures, rather than being in the umbrella term of like Asian or people of color or diversity, and also share different parts of our cultures, because people are scared of things that they don't know about.
Yeah.
And if we're able to share that we are also human, if everything is based on humanity, like if, we can show that Asians are human and we have different cultures and we have different traditions, yes, but it's all based on humanity, and we should all celebrate the differences of our cultures, then what's to be afraid of? And as classical musicians, we can do the same by embodying these roles, whether they're Asian or not, but we're ultimately telling a human experience. And so if we're able to do that, then people who are not of Asian descent or heritage can also sing Asian music and embody Asian cultures and values. We had so many missions. But ultimately, it was an initiative to combat all of the stuff that was happening during the pandemic and still today.
Right.
And also to share our culture and spread joy, especially because during the pandemic, it was so saturated with whether it was music or people literally just scream writing on their Facebook pages about what is going on, how they were feeling. And we knew that joy was needed.
Right.
So it wasn't just the music. It wasn't just our Shades of Yellow parts where, we could feature Asian artists and uplift Asian voices. Or our WIP talks where we did the Asian and Black solidarity discussion, or the generational differences. It was also things like the secret prank video of Chinese with friends, or guests between Spanish and Tagalog, and those things. I felt there was no content specifically like that.
Right. That
was geared towards awareness, but also, we would have a serious note and we would have a lighter note. And especially for our most recent one, like the hashtag Stop Asian Hate benefit concert, which was created in response to the Atlanta shootings. And, Helen and I were like, we wanted to get something out there. We wanted to, provide a place of solace, a moment of solace, and but also spread the awareness while it's still fresh in people's minds. But it's combined all the things that who we are as Asians and Asian Americans or Asian Canadian, and our response to all of those and the things that we've been feeling this entire time into one concert, which is still available for viewing on YouTube.
Yeah. And it's really good.
Thank you.
I was wondering how you think about your identity as a Korean American, and if that's changed at all over the course of your life?
It's funny because I think growing up, my parents always told me, you know, you're probably not going to get this one thing, for example, because you're Asian. People discriminate against you. And there's a part of me that's always, you know, that was always very naive and gullible and a huge believer of the American dream, and that America was, you know, it believed in equality. And of course, the shades get drawn,
Right.
and you, especially with these crises, you see for how far away from, you know, whether we have made progress or not, how far we are away from the perfect quote unquote American dream, and how I can not am, but can be treated as a second-class citizen, because I will never be able to shed my own skin. I will never be able to hide in the midst of whatever culture I'm in. I am who I am. And it was, and for it to have taken, you know, 28 years for the shades to be fully drawn, and possibly not even completely drawn yet. But it was very eye-opening, and being a part, and that's kind of where the name comes from. And like, that's kind of like what we want to show, is that we are unapologetically Asian, because we can't apologize for how we look and our cultures and our food and all of that stuff. But Helen actually came up with this name because she was inspired by the film Crazy Rich Asians. And which is, you know, it was such a cool film and beautiful. But specifically, and I'll share with you the quote. So the director, John Chu, wanted to use the Coldplay song Yellow, for his film. And he was originally denied to get the rights for it. So he wrote a letter to Coldplay to persuade them. And this is what he said. My whole life, I've had a complicated relationship with the color yellow. From being called the word in a derogatory way throughout grade school, to watching movies where they call the cowardly people yellow, it's always been a negative connotation in my life. That is, until I heard your song. For the first time in my life, it described the color in the most beautiful, magical ways I had ever heard. The color of the stars, her skin, the love. It was an incredible image of attraction and aspiration that made me rethink my own self-image. We could reclaim the color for ourselves, and it has stuck with me for the majority of my life. And Helen read that, and she thought of the title or the name of our organization, and that it just all made sense. His letter made sense to us, and because we all had that those shared experiences, no matter what culture, what Asian culture or heritage you're from, whether you're Japanese or Filipino, like, it was most likely as an Asian American or any Asian living away from Asia where you don't blend in. It was an experience that we all shared.
Yeah, I was really struck by what you said about how, right, like, this is the identity you have, this is the experience you have, and that can be experience of like joy and connection, but also it can be very hard with things like the Atlanta shootings. And you wanted to talk about how you deal with your emotions and reactions when something like that happens.
Yes. So in general, whether there is a crisis or not, I always tell my friends, or I would at least recommend is, if you need a moment away from this art form, whether it's an hour or a week or a month or possibly even forever, like we should be reevaluating based on our mental state, because this art form, it asks for a lot. It asks for all of you and then more. And we're constantly, people are demanding something from us constantly, and without checking in on ourselves, without worrying about what our mental state might be. And this is crazy, but for someone who, I feel like it's crazy for someone to say who has never actually had the privilege of going to a therapy session, but at least I feel like, we should be allowed. Yes, hundreds and thousands of dollars have gone into what we do and our careers and our studies, but as humans, we are fully allowed. We have to give ourselves a permission to walk away for however long you need. And that was the pandemic for me. The pandemic, it was a devastating loss for an entire industry. And there was so much sound on social media. And for me, and again, this is not a judgment, because I don't know how people did it, but I simply could not sing. I felt every part of my being told me that this is the time to be silent. Let the people feel, the loss. It was just something that I was not mentally prepared for, to be doing something while the pandemic was happening. The Black Lives Matter movement came up in a really big way. And so many of my community, whether I was aware of it at the time or not, were being harassed or attacked. And then especially with these Atlanta shootings, it didn't surprise us. We were not shocked. It had been almost an entire year of these attacks. And then, but what I was afraid of was that this would inspire more violence. I feel like because of social media, because of cancel culture, we're so afraid to be honest. And that's not just me being included. That's also any organizations, any companies, people are so afraid of being canceled that one wrong word and no one will ever discuss you anymore. I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I don't think it should exist, because communication is the only way that we will ever think. That was just something that I realized that I chose not to sing, and I chose to speak. I chose to write. I chose to create in many different ways that I didn't even realize that I could. Because of the pandemic, because of multiple crises that happened. And it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to know that you have other possibilities, you have other avenues. I know people who have said this is the only thing I can do. I'm not talented in other regards. I would not be able to do anything else. And I think they can.
What has it been like getting back into singing? Because I saw that you won a competition, so things are slowly, glacially picking up back again.
Yes, slowly but surely. I'm very fortunate. When school started, of course, got back to singing because I had to continue to work on ourselves. Time still flows, no matter what. So this need to catch up, so to speak, has always been a part of me, especially because I don't have a degree in music. So I was very frantic when I was younger, going into grad school, worried that I didn't know things, but I calmed down because I realized, I'm actually okay. So with the Cooper Bean competition, they placed a lot of importance in having an even playing field. And they knew the importance of singing in a theater. They knew the importance of not singing directly into a condenser mic. And, you know, in comparison to other like competitions, and I know people did what they could do, hopefully. It was amazing. It was they understood the point of this art form. And the living human voice. So to be able to sing on a stage, you know, with a live pianist, it was bliss. It was everything. I forgot that, you know, it was still being pre-recorded and it was being filmed and it wasn't, you know, actually live. I forgot about it, actually. And so a few bars into Mon Coeur, it just dawned upon me that I was like, oh wait, I only get one take. I should probably, you know, not make mistakes, quote unquote. So, but it was, you know, it was such a great experience, and I'm eternally grateful for them and for, the supporters and the donors. And I know, and I'm very well aware of the privilege that I have in comparison to most of my colleagues.
What did you sing at the competition?
I sang Mon Coeur from Sansona Delilah, and I sang Acerba Voluta.
Oh my god.
For the second piece from Adrienne Lecouvre. Yeah. And that particular day was special because I was the first one to record at 11 a.m. and my one rehearsal was at 10:30 a.m. For 15 minutes, and then I got a 15-minute break, and then we recorded. And I remember being so concerned about having to wake up or having my body be awake, you know, because it is, you know, we use our entire body to sing. And I woke up at 5 a.m. Like, that was the plan. I woke up at 5 a.m. In case of any allergies or anything like that, I took some behind-the-counter Sudafed, which probably also helped me wake up. And, you know, did a little bit of stretching and yoga after I had done my hair, because I feel like that always takes the longest part, longest time. And
your hair did look good.
I had no idea what I was doing. It was like, well, it's gonna go somewhere. And it got done, and I was like, wow, this went better than I expected. Because I gave myself enough time for my body to be awake.
Yeah.
And I flew in a few days earlier to make sure that no matter where I was, I could at least be somewhat acclimated to allergy season in that area or anything like that. So.
And it's so nice when, like, your experience of a singing event, let's call it, aligns with the result you get. You know, we were like, you think it goes well.
I know.
And they also think you sang well. Because sometimes they don't always match up.
No, absolutely not. Like, there are times when you feel like, you know, you sang terribly, and then, but there are still people who loved it and, like, who thought it was amazing, and, like, and, you know, and then, of course, like, the opposite also happens, which is not as nice. But it is nice for those things to line up and know that, you know, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Like, we're not having, like, a moment. Yeah.
Wonderful.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. I had a wonderful time talking about it.
To learn more about Alice and Helen's initiative, you can visit wearyellowproudly.org. and Alice can be found on Instagram at ChungYAC. We'll close out the episode with Mon cœur s'ouvre à ta voix from Sanson et des Lilas by Sanson, which is one of the arias that Alice won the Cooper Bing competition with. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of your voice, take care of your body, and be well.